take this get user repos, take this whole thing here and just get rid of it. You can really see how this is cleaning up. And then while we're at it, let's go down to the user component, which is right here. And we no longer need to pass in get user repos or repos. In fact, we no longer need to use this render props. We can just now use a regular component because this stuff doesn't need to be passed in. So we can just simply say now component equals user. Cleans that up. Now let's go into our GitHub state and let's put in this get repos. Okay, so we're going to set loading. Before I forget this time, let's add this right here. So get user repos, or else I'll forget. Okay, so we're set loading. We're going to make the request to get the repos. And then instead of doing this, we're going to dispatch to our reducer an object with the type of get repos and then the payload. The payload is going to be res.data. Okay, now we'll go to our reducer and let's create get repos, or not create, but add a case for get repos. And all we're doing here is returning our current state and then filling the repos array with the payload and setting loading to false. What's going on here? I put a colon there for some weird reason. So let's save that. And now we need to go back into user.js. Now we already brought in our context, right? We already initialized our context. So this get user repos and repos, this is now part of the GitHub context. It's not a prop. These aren't props. So we can get rid of these from here and also down here in our prop types. We no longer even need to have any prop types. And then what we'll do is, let's see, the repos are coming from the GitHub context now. So we can just say repos. And then the method that we're using, which is get user repos, is also coming from the context, which is being called right here. Okay, so we don't even have to change anything down here. This is now coming from the context. And then the repos themselves are also coming from there, which we're passing in as a prop to the repos component. So let's save. And now I believe we can go back to app.js and we can completely get rid of this and this. We'll keep the alert for now because we haven't dealt with that yet. Yep, so once we deal with it, we won't even have to do that. But let's save this. And let's make sure this Axios is never used. So now in our user.js, where not user.js, but we don't even need prop types here. In app.js, we don't even need Axios anymore because we're not making any requests from here anymore. That's the job of, you know, GitHub state and our actions. So let's make sure this still works. If we reload this page, we still get the repos. And it's now coming from context. If we go to our React tools and we go to our GitHub state provider value, you can see we have our 5 repos in here. All right. If we look at the app level state, we just have, I mean, you can't really tell much from this, but it's just the alert that's in the state, which we're going to take care of in the next video. All right, guys, so now we just need to take care of the alert because remember we have an alert state in our app.js. Now I'm going to actually make a whole new context for alerts, and it's not going to be much. We only have this one method. We only have this one piece of state. However, this gives you an idea of how you can break your global state up into basically up into resources. If you have blog posts, if you have products, things like that, so you don't have to squish everything into one single context. So in my context folder, I'm going to create a folder called alert. And I'm going to create the same 3 files. I'm going to do alert, uppercase A, alert state.js. We're going to create alert context.js. And we're going to create alert reducer.js. So this is the common workflow that you'd use if you're using, if you're doing things this way. So our context is pretty simple. We can probably just copy from the GitHub context. We're basically just initializing it. So I'll copy these 3 lines here, and in the alert context, paste that in and just change this and this to alert context. Okay, and then let's see, I guess we could do some more copying and pasting. So in our alert state, let's copy the GitHub state and go to our alert state and paste that in, and we'll just go from top to bottom. So basically we want to bring in the alert context, alert reducer, okay. Now, as far as types, the only 2 types we have are set alert and remove alert. So set alert and remove alert, which I already added. And then we're going to change this to alert state. And alert state, the initial state is going to, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set the initial state to null. So basically, instead of doing like an object where I have alerts null, I mean, I could do that, but since this is the only piece of state, I'm just going to set the entire thing to be null. Okay, and then we'll just set it to a single object, a single alert object. And then here we're going to use reducer, but we want to make sure we pass in alert reducer. So we can use state and dispatch. We're only going to have 1 method, so we can get rid of all these actions. So everything down to set loading. All we're going to have here is a set alert. I'll put that in a second. Now for the provider, it's going to be alert context.provider. Change this as well. And then as far as the value, we only need 2 things. We need the alert, which is the entire state. Remember, I set the state to null. It's just going to be state for alert. And then we also have our method, which is going to be set alert. So we can just get rid of that and just keep it like that. All right. And then finally, we want to export default alert state. Okay. So now in order to use this, we need to wrap our component in the provider, just like we did with the GitHub state. So I'm going to copy in app.js. I'm going to copy this down, change this to alert state, change that to alert state. And let's go down here, and right under GitHub state, I'm just going to put alert state, and we're going to wrap that. Okay. Now, this show alert, let's take that and let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of that whole state, all this stuff. No longer need it. No longer do we need to pass in alert as a prop here. No longer do we need to pass in set alert as a prop here. Okay, so basically we got rid of all those props we were passing back and forth and up and down. So now in alert state, I'm going to paste in our, well, I call it show alert, but that's fine. So this show alert, let's change this back to set alert, because there's no reason not to, because we don't have that use state, method anymore. Now this is going to take in a message, a type, and then let's see, we're going to dispatch. Just remember, all our actions here, they're always going to dispatch an object to the reducer with a type, and this is going to be set alert. Okay, and then the payload is going to be an object with the message and the type. And then in the set timeout, we no longer have this set alert. What we want to do is dispatch. So I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to dispatch an object with the type of remove alert, because we want to remove it after 5 seconds. So let's save that. And now let's go. Why does this say can't resolve alert state? Let's see, app.js. Oh, I said GitHub alert state. It should be alert. Okay. Where is Axios not used? Alert state. Yeah, in alert state, we're not making any requests to any API, so we don't need Axios. All right, so now we just need to create the reducer to handle set alert and remove alert. So let's go to our alert reducer, and we're going to import set alert and remove alert from our types file. And then let's create our function. So export defaults, the function with state action. And we're going to have a switch, which is going to evaluate action dot type. We'll have a default, which will just return state as is. And then let's add our case of set alert. So for set alert, we're simply going to return the payload, which is the alert object, the message and the type. Okay, and then, oops, why did I put a colon here? And then we're going to have a case of remove alert, which is simply going to return null. It's going to set it back to null. And that's it. That's our reducer. So let's see. In app.js, we no longer need use state because we're not using any component level state. It's all coming from context. And we got rid of all of our props that we were passing in. So now in the alert component, which is in layout, alert.js, we're no longer passing this in as a prop, right? So we need to bring our context into this component. So let's import alert context from context / alert / alert context. And then just like we did with the GitHub context, we're going to initialize it with use context. Okay, we need to bring in use context in order to use it. I don't know. I keep putting that uppercase O. I don't know what it is. It's just the way my fingers land when I type context for some reason. So we brought that in. Now this alert right here, we could put alert context dot alert here. But then we would have to do it here and here. So I'm going to just destructure and pull out alert. We're going to pull it out from alert context. Okay. Now we don't need this prop right here. We didn't have a prop type for it. We should have, but we no longer need that. So that's good. Now, the last thing we have to do is when we call an alert, which I believe we call from the search component, right? So search.js, yeah, we still have set alert being passed in as a prop, which it's not. It's part of the context. So let's get rid of that. And let's see, we'll get rid of the prop type. And we can get rid of this too, prop types. We brought in the GitHub context, but since we're dealing with the alert now, we have to bring in the alert context as well. So let's say alert alert context, and then we're going to do the same thing we did here, only with alert. Okay, so let's see, we have that. Now we're calling set alert right here, and all we have to do is add to it alert context. There we go again with the O. Alert context dot set alert, and that should do it. Actually, let's make sure we added it to our state alert state provider. Yeah, right here, set alert. Okay, so the alert should still work. Let's try it out. We'll go ahead and click, and there we go. And just to make sure it's coming from the right place, we'll look in our alert state context provider, and in the value, it's null now because it got cleared. But as soon as I hit that, you'll see that the message and the type, they get passed in here, and it goes away in 5 seconds, because after 5 seconds in our alert state, it dispatches remove alert, which in our reducer just returns the state back to null. Okay, so that's pretty much my workflow for using the context API along with use context, along with the use context hook, and along with the use reducer hook. So these things in combination, I think, gives you a pretty nice flux pattern without having to implement Redux or any third-party tools, any third-party library. Okay, and it's a hell of a lot nicer because, I mean, look at our app.js. We don't have all those methods. We don't have any state. We don't have a bunch of, 4 different props, methods and stuff being passed in here, methods being passed up. So it's all managed within this single source of truth in our context. All right, guys. So there's a couple more things that I'd like to do. One, I don't like how we have this route and we have the render and props in 2 components. What I'd like to do is just simply create a home component within our pages folder and just link that and have these embedded in that. Another thing is I'd like to create a not found component. So if we go to something slash something, right now it just gives us a blank page, which is okay, but I'd rather have it just say page not found or something. So let's do this first. This is going to be pretty easy. Inside pages, so we have components pages. Right now we just have an about. Let's create a new file called home.js, and let's do racf. So this is going to be pretty simple. I'm actually going to use a fragment here. So we'll bring in fragment, and let's change this to fragment. And then we just need to bring in the search and users component, and we won't need to bring them in here anymore. So I'm going to just cut the search import, and bring that in here, except the path is a little different now. We need to do .. and then get rid of components. Okay, and then we also want users, so we can now get rid of that. We're really cleaning up this app.js file, and that's going to be .. /users, and then we're just going to put those in here. So search and users. Okay, and since we're returning a fragment just directly like this, we don't even need the return. If we're using an arrow function, we can shorten this up and just do that. Okay, and then we have to bring in the home component now. So I'm going to go right here and import home, and it's going to be in pages /home. And then down in our route, instead of doing render and all this crap, we can just go ahead and say component equals home. All right, make that look a lot neater. All right, good. And if we check it out, we get the same thing. Everything should still work. Awesome. So you can see that, you know, it's been quite a few videos, and the functionality of our application has not changed at all, but the code has changed big time. So you can write the same application using much different code. And I think that the way we just did it using context and using, you know, global state is much cleaner. All right, and apparently we don't need fragment anymore either. Okay, so now I just want a not found component. So in pages, once again, I'm going to create a component called not found.js. Let's do RACF. And for this, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything special. I'm just going to put an H1 and we'll say not found, and we'll put a paragraph and we'll just say, actually, let's give this a class of lead. And we'll just say the page you are looking for does not exist. Okay, so now in our app.js, let's bring in that not found. Okay, so we'll bring in not found, and then all we have to do is put at the very end, make sure this is at the end, and just do route component equals not found. So now if we go to, let's say, slash whatever, we get our not found component. All right. So our application is all set. In the next video, we have a little bit of preparation to do, and then we're going to go ahead and deploy to a platform called Netlify. All right, guys, so now it's time to deploy our application, and there's a bunch of, you know, different ways you can deploy React, a bunch of different services. I think Netlify is one of, if not the best. I mean, you get a free tier for, you know, small applications or small websites, and you have environment variables, you have a CLI you can work with, you have form submissions, all kinds of stuff. And there's a few ways you can do it. You can bring your site in from GitHub or GitLab if you want, but we're going to use the CLI tool to deploy our site. All right, now there's one thing we have to do within the code first. So if we go, if you recall, we created this env.local file that has this, you know, these global variables for our GitHub client ID and secret. Now, we're not going to want to use this in deployment, in production. So what I'm going to do is go to our GitHub state file in our context, because that's where we actually use this, where we use these. And we're going to have up at the very top, not the very top, but below the types and right above the state, let's initialize a variable called GitHub client ID, and then let's initialize GitHub client secret. Okay, and then what we want to do is check the environment. So we're going to say if, and the way that we check our environment to see if it's in production or not is say process.env, and then we want to do dot uppercase node underscore env, and we're going to say if that's not equal to production. If it's not equal to production, then I want this GitHub client ID, I want it to equal this right here, this process.env React app, blah, blah, blah. All right, so we're going to set that. And then we want to do the same thing for the GitHub client secret. We'll set that equal to client underscore secret. Now, if we are in production, so else, then we're just going to want to use a normal global variable. We're not going to use this React app thing here. So what I'll do is copy this, paste it in, and I'm just going to get rid of the React app underscore. So it's just going to look for a global variable called GitHub client ID and GitHub client secret. And now we just need to replace down here in our requests, which will actually make it look a bit neater. We can replace these with those variables. So for instance, this one, this is going to be GitHub client ID. This is going to be GitHub client secret. Okay, so it actually makes this look a bit neater. We'll do it here as well. Client ID. And this will be client secret. I'm just going to copy this. Okay, we'll do the same thing here. Client ID, this will be the secret. And I think that's it. Those are the 3 requests to the GitHub API. All right, so we'll save that. Now we're going to stop the server because we're ready for deployment. Okay, everything should still work. Okay, go back. We can clear. Good. About page. So back here in the terminal, I'm going to stop this with Control-C, clear this up. And we need to install the Netlify CLI. So we're going to do npm install, and we're going to install this globally. So -g netlify-cli. And by the way, you have to have a Netlify account. So just go to netlify.com, create an account, log in, and you should see a dashboard like this. And this is all free. Whoops, I'm on a Mac, so I have, since I'm installing globally, I have to run sudo. And then while that's going on, we have to actually create a config file here. So we want to put this right in our root. We're going to create a file called netlify.toml. And we just want to specify a build folder. So build, and we want to say publish equals, and then the name of the build folder, which is going to be build, because with React, when we run npm run build, it's going to create a folder called build, and that's our deploy. That's our production build. So let's save this. All right, now we have the Netlify CLI installed. So I'm going to just go ahead and do a netlify init. All right, so it's asking me if I want to create it without a Git repository. I'm going to say yes, and then the site name, which we'll say this actually has to be unique. So we'll do like GitHub Finder, and then a bunch of numbers. And team, I only have one team.